welcome you to our cyber services session. Just a few quick administrative remarks. We'll be taking questions at the end of this session. There's a Q&A microphone right here in the center aisle. Please step up to the microphone and ask your question so that everyone can hear it. Also, please take time to silence your mobile device. And this session has been approved for CompTIA continuing education units and or GIAC continuing professional education credits and may support other continuing education certification maintenance requirements. We'll provide documentation of your attendance at this session as a member benefit for FCA members. Miss Regina Dahl here has the badge scanner, and she'll be in the back afterwards. You can get her to scan your badge. If you're not a member and you want to receive this documentation, you can have your badge scanned and then stop by the FCA booth, which is at number 725 to join. At this time, it's now my pleasure to introduce the moderator this afternoon, Ms. Patrice Wilmot. She is the Chief, Cyber Services Division, Defense Information Systems Agency.
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. And I think you've heard over the last few days a lot about the cyber war that we're all involved in. DISA, of course, has a responsibility for continuously monitoring and protecting and defending our environments. So what we're going to do this afternoon is kind of give you a little bit of an overview of what we do at the agency. I do want to make one caveat up front that because this is an unclassified environment, this will be kept at a pretty high level because we don't want to get into any classification. But I want to introduce our panel members. First, we have Jeff Buss. Jeff is the commanding officer for the DISA Command Center. So he's in charge of all the command and control for the way we conduct ourselves in the cyber area. Tony Purvis is the director for DEC Oklahoma City. Almost forgot, Tony. Yeah, you're in control of everything. Kate Phelps is the chief of the DISA IT services. And Michael Sandell is the chief for the Vulnerability Assessments branch. He works in my division, the Cyber Services. So I am going to sit down, but we're going to ask a few questions. And the first thing I do want to kick off with is with you, Jeff. If you could talk to us about how we defend our boundaries in the cyber arena.
Okay, happy to. Is this on? Everybody hear me? Mike, can you hear me? No, I need big boy voice. Is that what you're saying? Okay. So I thought I'd kick it off with the day in the life of DISA and what happens at the command center in a 24-hour period. So my focus is to look back a week and to look forward 72 hours. So in any 24-hour period, give you kind of the scope, we do three things: command, operate, and defend. So let me start with the operate to kind of give a little bit of the scope of what we're talking. So we deal with a $24 billion enterprise spread out generally at 11 decks, one of which Tony runs at Oklahoma City. But they're not small decks. They're big, large data centers spread out across the world. So we have 4 DNCs, DISA NetOps centers that are spread out, one in PAC, one in CONUS, or Global is what it's called now, in Scott Air Force Base, and then one in Europe, and one down at CENT. So those are the big 4. And those house 2,500 applications. They run worldwide transport. They run 1,000 of those 2,500 are enterprise applications, and we'll talk a fair amount about the enterprise applications here today. They support well over 500 transport missions and hundreds of RPA missions across the globe in any given day. We also have one of our commanders from DISA Africa in the crowd today, Mike Hagerty, if you want to raise your hand and say hi. And Rob Mawini is in the crowd here today, so that both of these guys could give that speech. Rob runs a lot of our defensive stuff and manages numerous of our defense side contracts in the crowd. So very, very important folks in our day in the life here. So events. What are we talking about for events? We try and follow the ITIL model. Events, incidents, problems in a day-to-day cycle. Events, we're looking at roughly 10 million alarms coming across, which is one of the things I'm going to talk about. Where industry can help us is to streamline some of those alarms and alerts that are coming in by using some enterprise engineering, if you will, to design these things to feed us what we need to know versus just raw alarms, which is some of the systems are better than others, but we have lots of them, as you can imagine. So we roughly have 2,400 trouble calls that come in. Those trouble calls range from, my PC doesn't work to, hey, AFRICOM is down in Djibouti on all their trunks. So we try to filter those very quickly to get them up to the DISA Command Center, and then we synchronize the efforts across the agency to remediate said issues on a day-to-day basis. Under the command and control piece, DISA's over 10,000 folks, manages an $11 billion budget. Most folks know that. We're in 18 states and 8 different countries. Run over 50 exercises. We're supporting over 30 operations in any 24-hour period. So a lot of stuff happening. We do the orders process for the agency and try and synchronize the efforts via command and control structure based on orders. The defense side, which is a lot of folks are here in the defense cybersecurity realm. So we run the forward edge of the battle area for the DoD. So it is the boundary defense, if you will. So 2.9 million users behind that boundary. We have about 102 CNDSP customers, or CDSP is what it's called now. Folks that pay us to defend their stuff that is hosted inside of DISA. And we have roughly 300 terabytes of data that comes across any 24-hour period, our sensors. So a lot of data coming across. And my guess is that'll probably double here in the next 18 months. So a lot of stuff coming across that we have to look at. So we have hundreds of sensors spread across the globe at these different decks and DNCs and step sites that monitor and feed us information. Hundreds of millions of alarms come out of those sensors in any 24-hour period. So we use big data analytics to look at some of that stuff, right? Some of that we work with other different agencies and services to help filter and monitor. But it feeds roughly 30 incidents, cybersecurity incidents happen in a day. They're categorized 1 through 8, so a lot of unknowns, and then we'll categorize them, whether it's a root level intrusion, a Cat 1 or a Cat 2. So we'll use that methodology to look at risks to the network in any 24-hour period. And then we produce roughly 25 tippers a day and implement numerous countermeasures throughout a day, roughly close to 100 different implementations of different countermeasures at different boxes throughout the infrastructure. So we're doing that all to support, the warfighters in the field who are our primary customers. And if you're a warfighter in the field, I see numerous of them out there today, you're touched by a DISA service, and I had very little appreciation before coming to DISA just how vast and what the impact was before getting there. But literally, you're touched, and if it's DFAS, if it's AKO, if it's your email, DEE, you're touched by DISA at some way, shape, or form, fashion throughout the day, if not via 10 or 15 or 20 different services that you utilize. So our goal is 100% mission assurance, and with 22,000 network changes that happen in a 24-hour period, that oftentimes becomes challenging. So that's where I turn to folks like Tony Purvis, who runs the deck to help us, who does thousands of those different changes just inside of his deck in a day. So with that, I yield the floor.
So, Tony, I'm going to go a little off script since Jeff kind of introduced this, but how do you go about prioritizing all of those different threats and exploits that are going on from a deck perspective?
So from a vulnerability standpoint, there's many categories of vulnerabilities that we deal with. The critical ones being the ones that we focus on the most. So first, we categorize those vulnerabilities, and then not only do we do this from a deck perspective and the people that work for us in DISA, it's our mission partners. It's very much a hand-in-hand relationship, because it's not just on us to patch systems at will. It's really working back through the mission partners and the program offices and working with them on testing those changes, implementing those changes. So from a prioritization standpoint, we look at the exposure of that vulnerability, we analyze it, and based on that exposure, we work back through the mission partner to try to schedule those as quickly as possible, those being the critical vulnerabilities that we're talking about. Then from a standpoint of the mission partner, scheduling, implementing those, Patrice, it's really, we try to do everything within a 30-day window, but as you know, zero-day vulnerabilities come out, other things come out. It's always it's a moving target on a daily basis as we look at our security posture.
And Kate, I think you see a lot of that too, from a balancing mission and keeping the DISAnet safe.
Yeah, so much in the same way that Tony just explained, I have a much smaller network that's under my area of responsibility, but the same level of of work that goes into mitigating the issues that come up and prioritizing that workload. We have a global network, 50 field sites that we support DISA-wide, and the applications and tools that they use at the deck and in the DCC reside on the network that I manage. So being able to prioritize that workload, implement changes that we need to implement in a very short order without impacting that mission is always a priority for us. So much the same level, just kind of at a different perspective overall.
And Mike, I would say with the tools that we have out there, I mean, that's really how we take action. So can you talk more to that?
Certainly. In looking at the different vulnerabilities that are out there and prioritizing them, it's really important for a system owner to understand the risk posture of their system. And so utilizing endpoint security products like HBSS, scanning tools like ACAS, we're able to prioritize what the biggest threats are, looking at both how prevalent the vulnerability is and how many layers of defense there are and how many may have holes in them. So it's important to look at all of the vulnerabilities together as sort of a package in an application and make sure the system owner understands what that risk is and how it affects them, and really what the best thing for them to fix is to get the most bang for the buck.
And Kate, can you say a little more to how you go about testing as we're addressing new vulnerabilities and trying to apply patches?
Sure. So as much as possible, we try to follow that 30-day, and have the opportunity to test as much as possible. When we get into the 0-day vulnerabilities that we get, sometimes that's lessened, and there are occasions where we have to deploy something with little to no testing, and deal with the effects of pushing out those fixes. In many cases, I'm a consumer of the fixes from HBSS and other tools that are pushed to us. So we also deal with what's the impact of those remediation actions that come to us as a consumer.
I'm going to give you one, Jeff.
Okay. What you got?
So where are you seeing success, and how do you think industry might be able to help us?
So success. So you just heard Terry Halverson speak, and one of his big pushes has been enterprise services. So I think if you look at DEE, and if you look at the anatomy of a spear phishing attack, right? Spear phishing attack is going to come in, and you're going to pick it up at EMSG, is one of our enterprise email master service gateways, and it's going to flow through the system. And I think one of the big successes we've seen is the ability to remediate that very quickly. Using DEE as a platform, an enterprise service, right, that reaches 1.9 million users to get in and wipe those emails, which is what Tony Purvis's crew does very, very quickly. So the synergy between the team of the EMSG and the sensor team to be able to feed that over to the guys that can actually take and remediate has gone from days to hours. So I would say that's a huge success for DISA and for the enterprise.
You want to say anything to that, Tony? That you've seen?
Yeah, like Jeff mentioned, it's really that identification of those either phishing attempts, a spillage, and what used to take our mission partners many days to clean. It's really that flash to bang of someone identifying an action, an issue. Now it's within hours and really, 15 minutes of going in, cleaning the environment, ensuring that there's no additional spillage, no additional propagation of that classified data. So we've really, I think, mastered over the past 6 years of running enterprise email the processes of how to really fix those things very quickly.
Yes. And Michael, do you want to talk to maybe how we handle planned versus unplanned?
Planned versus unplanned events. So planned is obviously so much easier with the vulnerabilities. So there's a lot of things that are known out there, and utilizing the tools that we have with HBSS and ACAS, we're able to scan for known threats. And we're able to generally have some foresight with that. By looking in the wild and looking at other reports, we can find out what's going on that even hasn't been classified yet as an IAVA or something like that, and know that they're out there. The unknowns are a little more difficult. We're still using parts of the McAfee product in HBSS with GTI and things like this to look for things, and with ACAS and PBS looking at the traffic. A lot of times we're able to find some things, but that is one of the hardest things we have now, is that correlation of data, trying to find what's new out there. So, but I think we've gotten fairly good at looking for the known problems. And we do write a lot of, as we find things, we do write the new signatures for HBSS to detect them.
And Kate, what do you see as the gaps, as tools are implemented, and, where do you need help?
That's a loaded question. But one of the issues that I have is I have a multitude of tools to use to tell me what the issues are. Right? I have everybody in the world is scanning my network, telling me what's wrong. Right? What I don't have and what I need help with is something to help us in an automated fashion remediate some of those issues. Right now, I've got reports that are stacking up, by the millions, telling me, I have this vulnerability or this is open, needs to be fixed. But it's a very manual process to go in and remediate each one of those findings, whether it's a STIG, an IAVA, or an internal tasking that comes in from our AO. So being able to remediate some of those issues in an automated fashion is probably my biggest stickler. We are piloting some tools to help us do that, but each tool is so far from what we found is very narrowly focused. So it'll fix a small number of things, and in a cash-strapped environment that we're in, we just can't afford to go out and buy 30 different products to do a remediation. So that's where we really need help from the community, is how we can fix those issues and fix them rapidly as they're identified.
And are you seeing similar things, Jeff?
Yes, I would say so. The challenge is, so we've got all these tools, right? So I come from an aviation background, right? So flying jets, and you have a master caution light, right? So you got a fire light that pops on. There is no fire light in cyber. So there is nothing saying, okay, it's hard work and it takes a lot of very keen discipline, if you will, and understanding each of the boxes. So how do you fight the whole ship is the challenge that we run into at the DCC. So you see it coming in. You've got a lot of activity happening today. And we know what we know, right? So from a signature-based perspective, but the ZND, the zero-day tools that are coming out are very helpful, but it's the integration of all of that technology that is the challenge that we struggle with probably the most.
Would you agree, Tom?
Yeah, along those lines, and really, whether it's a server environment of a Windows server, a Linux server, or Kate's infrastructure that supports or that we use within the decks, it's really, that challenge is, once the vulnerability is identified, it's the testing of that remediation and the implementation schedule. Because like Kate said, we don't have some easy magic button that we can just press and say, remediate 2,000 vulnerabilities on one system. It's the process of testing those and developing a schedule with our mission partners of implementing those. So, like Kate said, from assistance or help from industry, we need some way to automate our remediation process of these thousands and thousands of vulnerabilities across the enterprise. And something that shouldn't be new to anyone in the audience is DISA does not do a good job of implementing anything. We can buy things with the best of them. We can buy a lot of software, we can buy a lot of services, but we typically do not do a good job of implementation. So that's what we really need help with, is a way to either pilot, implement, do something that is not just buying something that becomes shelfware after 6 months because we can't figure out how to use it in conjunction with the industry. So it's really the acquiring and implementation of new things that's going to help us really get through these vulnerabilities in a very quick way.
And Mike, how do you see it with the advent of us really trying to focus more on continuous monitoring and all the diverse environments? I mean, do you see similar issues, or?
We definitely do. There's probably 50 vendors in here who make stuff for Red Hat and for Windows, every version of Windows. Now, unfortunately, they dropped support for things like Windows 2003, but DoD still runs Windows 2000. So that not having the tools, and then we have those other things that we run, the other flavors of X, the AIX environments, the HP Unix running on a RISC platform, the mainframes, and one tool is not going to solve them all. But again, we don't want 30 tools, and getting those, everything is proprietary. So getting things to talk together and to be able to get meaningful data out of is really a hole in continuous monitoring. We can, like I say, continuously monitor Windows and Red Hat. So it's all over everywhere. It's all of those other things. And when we get to the crazy stuff, voice, video, appliances are the bane of my existence. Mobility, trying to check for configuration and vulnerability on those, it has been a real challenge, and we definitely need help in that area.
And along those lines, since I also run the mobility environment for DISA, or for DoD, it's amazing to me that my daughter, being 15 years old, knows how to update her iPhone to the latest version of iOS. But I've got lots of people out there, because we run 50,000 iPhones, Androids, iOS devices, Android devices, that people do not load the latest version of patches. We finally have gotten some teeth in this process to where we're now turning people off if they're 2 or 3 iterations back. So Apple releases something new probably every 2 to 3 weeks, and we had people as of just, Jeff? A month ago running an iOS 7 version, several hundred people that were still on iOS 7. I'm like, I don't understand. It's an easy button. You press it, you download, you install. And we had people that weren't doing that. And as Apple or Android come out with new vulnerabilities that are identified, we need people, the end users, to actually follow through and update their devices. So mobility, something that I never really comprehend, that it's difficult to do, but people seem to struggle with maintaining the posture of those endpoint devices, and we're getting more and more involved in that now.
Oh, great. Do you have any other? So I guess we'll go ahead and take questions. I was getting worried.
Hi, thank you. My name's Harry Wingo. I'm with Advanced Systems Development, and I just had a question on the automated side. It's very interesting. You're probably following what DARPA is doing as far as trying to automate, and it seems like it might be able to tie things together. And I think it's really interesting that DEF CON 24 on August 4th, apparently it'll be the first time that you have one machine cluster go against another machine cluster in a capture the flag. And they've been down selected to 5 or 6. I know that there's some folks around here that are part of that. For ASD, we're paired with a non-traditional defense contractor called Tessera that has a product called NetTrust that came out of the Bot Hunter Project, 2008, Army Research Lab, SRI International, and National Science Foundation. And yes, it's another tool, but it's not looking only at signatures, but if you look at net flows and anomalies and applying a lightweight look at the different stages that happen in an infection. So beyond inside the perimeter, how do you actually see when somebody pops up and knock that down as soon as possible? So the question that I had is, what's the best way for industry, for us, to help you get information like that as quick as possible? So Harry Wingo with Advanced Systems Development. Thank you.
Who wants to take that?
So from a hardware standpoint, server standpoint, I'll let Jeff address more of the network side, but from a server standpoint, it's like Kate mentioned, lots of vendors have software out there. We've got to find ways to prototype, to pilot, to bring things in, because I think that what we do is we trust industry. They come in, they know 20% of our environment because they know how to do it in their own workspace. They come in, they sell us on, this is going to work, and it works for 20%, but we need a 90% solution, not just a 20% solution. So it's really understanding more about our environment before you come in and try to sell things, because selling things by itself doesn't do us any good. It's that implementation process that we need help with. So understanding more about our infrastructure, I think it would be valuable.
Thank you.
So, and I guess my comment would be similar. So begin with the end in mind, right? So what is the end goal of this product and this system? So we've got lots of stovepipe systems, going back to reels, right? So that are still in some of our decks, right? So begin with the end in mind, and know that it's probably not going to get updated immediately. So the tail piece is always an issue with the implementation. So designing it to be as simple and to work with a system that's already in existence, perhaps like a Microsoft or some version of a system that we're already using. So instead of developing something new that we're going to have a tail for that doesn't integrate with anything else. So which is a traditional problem that we have trying to fight this network.
Right. Thank you.
Yep. No, thank you for
I'd
the
like
question.
to just add quickly to that, and because he brings up a really good point, is sometimes it's not that we are lacking in tools, right? We have a lot of tools, that we have come in, we've implemented, we've done that quick stand-up, declared a quick win, but we've never fully taken advantage of all of the capabilities within that tool. In some cases, we're trying to fix a specific problem, so we focus in on the capabilities for that specific problem. But there's a lot of tools out there that have a lot more capability. We're just not taking advantage of them. And in some cases, we don't know that those capabilities are there. So having that consultation and the evaluation of your current tools to not sell you another tool, but to tell you, hey, did you know that this was part of this suite that you already own, and how you can take better advantage of those things.
Right. Couldn't agree more. For
Thank you.
example, advanced system development is at joint staff. And Tanium, a lot of people hear about that.
Right.
We're actually, one of the folks leaning forward, applying that. So thank you for what you're doing. Look forward to helping if we can. Thanks.
Exactly.
Thank you.
It's just a general question. Hi, my name is Josie Umar, Apex Engineered Solutions. My general question is, it piggybacks a little bit on what the gentleman was asking, in that you talk about just having a number of vulnerabilities. So the question is, how flexible? We understand that these vulnerabilities are occurring in a secure environment. So how flexible is DISA in documenting or making available? It's like you're asking someone to solve a problem that they don't know. They don't have enough information in order to bring you a enterprise or a more holistic solution. How flexible basically is DISA in providing that information to industry, so the industry can come to you and not just sell you one solution or one tool that only fixes 20% of the vulnerabilities, if they truly can augment in their own environment a solution that can fix 80%. If they don't know what 80% of the issues are,
Correct.
somewhere there's got to be a compromise that you give them enough information that they truly can configure a solution, for your problem. So how flexible is DISA in that? To that end.
Since I know Josie, I'm very inflexible. Okay, Josie. No. So I think you bring up a good point, because when we talk to industry, it's great to come to these events and have an open dialogue. But as soon as you start talking RFIs and RFPs and proposals, acquisition rules sort of get in the way of being totally flexible with disseminating information, because we have to make sure that everything's fair. So contracting rules sort of limit how flexible we are and how much information we can give once we go into that acquisition process. So good point. I would love to tell everyone in here that we have this many servers, here's the configuration, here's the OS version, here's what we're running, to help you, or to give you guys the information to come back and tell me how we need to fix this problem. But there's acquisition rules associated with how much we can give out at what times.
Okay, but to that end, you may have vendors that have already sold you products that or are supporting you, and what it would take would be some sort of tweaking of an existing product, but they may not have, and Kate, I'm sorry, I'm unfamiliar with your particular area. When you talked about some of your particular issues, I don't know what that dynamic looks like in you being able to communicate. So we're not even talking about publishing tomorrow or 90 days, a full-blown RFP, or looking for that kind of information. There's got to be a way for me to tell the doctor, hey, I'm aching in this. I just can't say my leg hurts. I've got to give him more specific information in order that he can truly diagnose the problem in a way. If he's already my doctor and he's servicing me in some capacity, I've got to be able to tell. I can't just wink at him or nod. I've got to give him more specific. So I'm asking, how do you, where is there that compromise that DISA can provide more specificity about what's taking place in your body, so that the people that are servicing you can truly diagnose your issues. So,
okay, now I'm really confused. But I think in many cases we can. There's a mix of situations. In some cases I can reach out because I have that vendor. I have easy access to that vendor, and I have them already on contract. A lot of the tools that we implement, we do a one-time buy. We have somebody come in, set it up, do 2 or 3 days of training, and then they're out the door. Right? There is no follow-on kind of contract. So being able to pull in the industry experts that aren't necessarily the vendors of that product, but can consult and know that product well and teach us better practices for those products. Whether that be the vendor of the product or someone that's very familiar with it, but it's really just going out and getting another contract to do that work. It's not inherent to the agency right now.
And Josie, I'm not sure how familiar you are with our capacity services contracts, but we've really broken the code over the past 15 years on having capacity acquired, that we acquire that capacity from industry, whether it be a server, whether it be a comm device, whether it be a storage device. We also have several software as a service contracts that we have. Our ITSM Remedy environment is a software as a service. So I think you're right. We have a lot of continuing contracts with vendors, and I think it's incumbent upon that vendor to do a health check quarterly with the government to say, hey, this contract's set up, you've got this tool on the contract, it's already available to you, but it's that dialogue on a regular basis, so we can talk with industry on those ongoing contracts and explain to them, here's what we're conquering today, here's our problem today, and industry, like you said, hey, like I just had a briefing with HP, one of our capacity services vendors, and they said, on your server contract, you've already got these tools on there. You can just add one more tool to this environment and automate it and do a lot of automated remediation. I'm like, I didn't know that. So they knew that we had the problem of this remediation. So I think it's that ongoing dialogue with our partners today, whether it be a capacity contract, a labor contract, but it's those health checks that the vendors need to come in and check with us. Because coming to Oklahoma City, I'll tell everyone, here's my problems. Here's what keeps me up at night. And it's through that ongoing dialogue, not just trying to sell something, but really trying to help.
So, Josie, I guess I would add one thing. So I just finished P.W. Singer and Mr. Friedman's book on cybersecurity. And as I read through that, it struck me that DISA has the same problem everybody else has, right? So my two biggest concerns and what keeps me up at night are network hygiene and spear phishing, right? So those are the two big things that kick our butt continuously. So, and it's standard across every company, every agency, every organization out there. I don't know that there's DISA specific. We're very similar to what the problem set is on the outside. So if they're having the problem on the outside, I assure you we're having it at DISA. And probably it's just bigger because we're huge. There are corporations that are bigger than we are, but they're having the same problems we are.
Other questions? That was way too easy.
Yes.
All right.
I would want to say one takeaway here, though, that we really, as DISA, we can't do this alone. So, again, the partnerships with industry and our mission partners is critically important. And I completely agree with what Tony said. Come in and have the dialogue with us because we're more than willing to talk to what our problems are because we do need the support.
So this is supposed to last an hour. We can't scan your badges, so we'll just have to sit and stare at each other for another 30 minutes unless someone's got some more questions.
Oh, good. The plant.
Badge scanned.
Don't scan
You're in
his.
trouble now. No, I don't really have a question, but I was just wondering if you could talk to where I think industry can help us, is that we do have a lot of shiny objects. We get brought shiny objects every hour, around the hour, but we've got analysts that are sitting out there looking at a minimum 23 different boxes to try to figure out what else is going on in the networks. I think industry can really help us with consolidating that view down to some consolidated. I know one is never going to work, but it's got to be less than 23 that I've got an analyst logging in, logging out of those capabilities. But can you talk to some of those issues and concerns that we have with that monitoring capability out there?
Well, Rob, this is your space. You may want to. You could probably talk to it there.
Well, I mean, I'm sure. So I'm sure Kate's got the same problem on her side with the DISINET that we're seeing. I mean, we see it from the global perspective of looking at everything coming through the DODE, and that's where we see the 23 different boxes. But as it peels down inside the decks on DISINET, even on Mike's side when he's doing HBSS and ACAS, I'm sure they've got the same, probably more compounded than we've got. I'm sure 23 is probably seeming like a really small number. But I don't know what the complexity is on that side of it. I know where it is at the DODE.
So you're asking to talk more to our complexity, complexity of the environments?
And where industry can really dive in and really help us solve that problem, I think.
So with HBSS as a classic example, it's not the 7 EPO servers that are, generally available right from a desktop. It's the cryptographically separated ones, having to get the data off of those, and there is no easy way. There is no easy button to get events off of there, and we're doing the same thing as you're talking about. We have to log into each one of those 7 servers to get data off of them. And ACAS is pretty much the same way. We have 14 security centers right now that aren't, not including the cryptographically separate ones. I think if you, last count, I think we had 90 total security centers in DISA. So
Mike, can you talk about TMRS? Because I thought TMRS was supposed to fix that.
That's what you get.
I can ask questions, right?
So what?
We need to keep this going.
No. So what do you want to say about CMRS, Tom?
I mean,
So-
TMRS was supposed to fix that correlation of ACAS, HBSS, and roll things up
that's
into
true.
one view.
That's true. CMRS, we do feed all of our data from ACAS and HBSS into CMRS. It does have some scaling challenges right now. In a current test that we finished this morning, it took 15 days from publishing to CMRS to reflect in CMRS because of a backlog of data. But eventually that could be a center point for knowing those vulnerabilities and configurations, but it is not there yet.
And I would ask, is everyone even familiar with what we mean when we say CMRS, continuous monitoring, risk scoring?
Yeah, it's basically an event correlation or a roll-up of all of our HBSS ACAS data to give us a grade by program or by site to say, this is how you're doing with this vulnerability or with this program. So, but like Mike said, from a pure number, we've got 15,000 servers. Each server has thousands and thousands of remediated vulnerabilities that are just, every day, Microsoft Tuesday, my system admins hate. When Microsoft chooses to release, Tuesday, every other Tuesday, one Tuesday a month, it's like that next brief that I get on security, the numbers just go up by 3 or 4-fold. They're like, yep, just be ready. The numbers are not going to look good right now. So it's the pure number, and is it a scaling issue? How can we scale it? Do we need more? I don't know, but I'm looking for something because my guys in Oklahoma City at least have looked at a way to get good ACAS data and give me a sort of a score of what my posture is for all the systems that we manage. And I think all the decks have something similar, but it would be nice to have a corporate standard that General Lynn, Captain Buss, Mr. Closter can look at to say, here's how we're looking today, or here's how we're looking at any point in time.
And that's a thank you. That's a space that we've talked to a few vendors about. Longview, Secure Innovations, smaller vendors that have worked in this space and are able to get data out of Security Center using APIs and consolidate that. And that's really a place that we can use help is that that area of getting the data, consolidating it, and really doing what TMRS will do one day.
Well, providing a view of really what our security posture is.
Right.
That's what we're really talking about.
So I would steal a quote from Amber Rogers. He talks about cyber is in comparison with aviation. So in the 1930s of the aviation, we know it's going to be important, right? We knew in the 30s aviation was going to be very important, but we didn't know how important. We didn't know how it was going to flow out, how it was going to define itself. And I feel very much that way when I go to work at trying to defend this portion of the DoDN. So we know it's going to be important. We know it is important, right? So, but trying to define it and trying to maintain, the key is situational awareness, right? So that I can provide that to the director, so that he can, make decisions on how he's going to fight the different portions of the network is very, very challenging, right? So we have all kinds of different data points. We have all kinds of different dashboards. We have e-health and ACAT and all these different tools that can show us live feeds, but bring it all together. There is no tool that brings that all together except for guys like the DCC and the staff and Tony's staff that brings their pieces together and feeds it up, right? So trying to fight the air wing is when it's so dispersed and so immature is very challenging. And I would say some of it goes back, if I could, another aviation analogy is before I'm getting launched off the end of a ship, I know that I need, a couple good tires. I know that I need wings, and I know both my engines have to work, right? So there's a go, no-go criteria. I have a minimum that I need to go fly. That hasn't been defined yet, right? So what is the minimum we need to successfully defend our network? Do we need to just keep dumping, box after box after box onto our network? And when is good enough, right? Can we sample 1% of the 800 million alerts that I get in a day, and is that good enough, or is it not good enough? And who's going to tell us that? So what does the industry do? What's the industry standard comparison for that particular box? Those are things I struggle with.
Any other questions?
You tried, Rob.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to thank you all for the time you spent today and your very useful insight to your problems. And again, Mr. Gina Dole will be in the back by the sign, scanning badges. And please thank everyone on the panel.
Thank you, guys. We did.
I obviously touched a nerve. I'm sorry. No. You're going back and forth.